What's up, everyone, and welcome back to Corked Stats here on the Mayo Media Network on YouTube with your host, John Laghezza, the big dude with the big mouth from the Big Apple, coming to you worldwide from Brooklyn, New York, as always. Thanks again for checking out our videos. Make sure you subscribe to the Mayo Media Network. Make sure you like this video, and make sure that you check out that playlist, that baseball playlist. The Fantasy Baseball Picks and Bets playlist is off the hook right now. We've been here every Monday and Friday for more than a month, so we got about a dozen videos or so covering it all. We are getting down into the dirt with the nuance, the context, and the details, and hopefully you learn something as well as have some fun as we get ready for the upcoming 2022 fantasy baseball season. All right, enough of that. How about more of this? If you're unfamiliar to my work, hey, you could follow it on Twitter at MLB Moving AVG. Type in MLB Moving Averages on that Bluebird Twitter machine any time of day, any day of the week. I live for this. Having so much fun as people start to shift away from football and into baseball, which is why I want to point you towards that library here at Mayo Media Net. It is the off season for some, but not for us. Come on, man. Death, taxes, sun rising in the east, setting in the west, and a big dude up before the crack of dawn every day to bring you the fastest show in MLB anywhere. So once you're done with the playlist, you'll see we have a lot of player breakdowns and individual kind of granular level stuff on Fridays. We began this last week. I want to start doing positional previews and help to get, a little bit more of the landscape, a little bit more of the battlefield, and just show a little bit more of the diversity, what we're all about here at the Mayo Media Network. So last week we did first base. I invite you to check that out. That content is going to be off, evergreen the entire offseason right up to opening day. So what we're going to do here today with second baseman, I'm going to run you through just an overview. We're going to look at the top 12, right, those 2B1s. We're going to look at last year's performance, and we're going to do a bit of a little study. I'm going to bring up projections. We're going to compare them to ADP, and we're going to look to identify some value. So without any further ado, let's jump on in. I have the Bat X projections up for second baseman. That is developed by my friend Derek Carty, super smart guy. You obviously got to be following him. Last week, I didn't do the best job with presenting this stuff. We're kind of learning on the fly. I should say I'm learning on the fly with this video stuff. So I think this will be a little more helpful. I'm going to leave up the season-long projections. Last week, I left up the dollar values. They're not as helpful. We're getting into that briefly. So for all you video people out there, that's what you see here is the 2022 projections. Any audio listeners, I'm going to try and walk you through it the best I can. But first, let's take a look at last year. The second base position, I don't want to say it's shallow. I don't want to say it's deep. It's certainly top heavy. This year, Trey Turner with the Dodgers has second base eligibility, so he's been considered for the 101, and I think he's worth every bit of it, right? You're getting average. He bat 328. You're getting runs. He scored 107. You're getting home runs. He hit 28. You're getting steals. He stole 32 with a 911 OPS. Trey Turner is excellent, and with that eligibility, you really got to be thinking about him as the 101 overall, though I got to be honest, I still believe Fernando Tatis Jr. is the best fantasy player in the league, but if you're worried about the shoulder and you want the eligibility, I get it. There is certainly an argument for Turner. Move on to Ozzie Albies, who people need to be considering as a first-round talent in roto leagues. He's been falling to the middle of the second. We're starting to see that gyrate up. Myself, I just took him at the turn in a 15-team league. I like 5 category contributors, and you get that from him. 259 average, 103 runs, 106 ribbies, 30 home runs, 20 steals. Just not a lot of people that can do that. So I think the top of the tiers is pretty secure, and then it starts to get a bit shaky for me. We had by finish, we had Simeon and Merrifield last year. Simeon, I really think, was over his skis a bit, 45 bombs, 15 steals. I don't think he's going to be able to repeat that with the environment shift that he's going through. It just didn't feel real for me. I'll give you a good example. So Marcus Simeon had 50 barrels. He had 45 home runs. We normally expect about a 60% conversion rate, not above 90. So I just think he's going to take a step back again with the hitting environment change. Over to Whit Merrifield. Again, a lot of balance that you're going to get there. The average of 277, always safe. The runs are safe because the plate appearances is there. We saw the home runs taper down to 10, and I think we can expect that to continue. He did have 40 steals. I don't know if we can expect that but he certainly does run. Altuve, Lowe really find themselves in a bit of a clump. You get a lot of the same stuff, more power than steals, a bit more average from Altuve, a bit more power from Lowe. So I think those guys are really probably roster dependent, really, right? Depending on how you're going about that build for yourself. Then it wraps up with Polanco, Marte, and India, who I also think are very similar. I love those guys. We'll get to that in a little bit. Marte, it's just really the injuries. I do think the sky is the limit as far as talent. And then we get to the bottom, where, if you can see by my face and the inflection of my voice, it's Edman, LeMahieu, and then even Cronenworth kind of picking up the bottom. Thanks, but no thanks. I mean, just briefly, at the bottom is really where we start to see flaws. We're talking about having to buy back in. LeMahieu only had 10 home runs and 4 steals. That's not going to do it in any format of fantasy league. Edman is somebody I've covered in depth. You could check that out. That's in that playlist that I mentioned before. Edman, I'm worried about that lineup spot. If you're following all the, hashing, all the back and forth on Twitter going on, Edman, Miles Straw at the center of conversation for steals. Edman with the 700 OPS. He doesn't have the high walk rate. He doesn't have the high OBP. And I think that makes him, a candidate to maybe have that lineup spot in jeopardy, right? So we went through last year briefly. You kind of know what you had. Looking backwards is not always the best way to look forwards. Let's take a look at the projections just briefly and see what we got. Turner at the top, of course. I mean, just crazy. 29 homers, 32 steals expected, 111 runs, 92 ribbies. Remember, ribby numbers for leadoff hitters will be boosted with the addition of the DH. I just grabbed brand new projections. A lot of them have been adjusted to reflect that, so do keep that in mind as if Trey Turner needed a boost. Ozzie Albies not far behind, 31 home runs, 19 steals. Again, there's that 30-20 that you have to circle in Roto. It is so critical. When we get to Merrifield, we see a repeat of 10 home runs, but Bat only looking at 25 steals. So again, we're going to get into how that translates into the dollar value in a bit. I just want to give you an idea of how to look at these projections and maybe digest them, and how, if our work and our assumption of regression is in line with projection systems, a lot of times that's a pretty good validation, and we see that again with Marcus Semien. Now, Semien is being projected for 31 homers, and 10 steals, but with a 258 average, that's not nearly what he put up last year, and certainly is not going to pay off that second round cost he was going at, though I think the market has sharpened a bit. Semien has begun to fall, but here's a big shaking but for everybody. As much as I'm not into Semien at the cost, we must not just throw him away. Don't throw away the baby with the bathwater. There is a point where overvalued players can become palatable when the price changes. So as Semien begins to drop from the second, he's now in the third. We've seen him in the fourth. If he gets to the fourth or the fifth, you have to take a look at Marcus Semien. He's not bad. We just think last year was totally shooting the moon. You see Altuve and Lowe, things looking pretty similar. Again, what we expected. Lowe with more power, Altuve more average. Polanco, 265 average, 26 home runs and 9 steals. We like that. I think I'm a little bit higher. Again, we'll get into that. Similar to guys like India. Then we see Edman projected for 22 steals and 11 home runs. That is something I've also pushed back on in my own videos. I love Derek Hardy. I have an infinite amount of respect for him. I consider him a friend. I've had him on my show, which make sure you check out the Corked Stats podcast. Really been hot and heavy lately. They had Matt Modica on this last week, getting a lot of heat, getting a lot of responses and positive feedback about having these successful high-stakes players on. So make sure you check out the Corked Stats pod along with the Corked Stats YouTube channel, and make sure you are subscribed here to the Mayo Media Net. You do not want to miss a thing as we pick up steam. So I did address Edman and my concerns. I do not see double-digit home runs. I know you're not relying on Edman for power, but I have heard people say that that's part of the calculus, right? The 11 home runs that you get opposed to what we expect from a guy like Straw, not to mention him again, but I admittedly expect maybe 5 home runs from Straw, but I expect him to keep his lineup spots. You can check all that stuff out in the video if you'd like. So there's a bit of looking back, and now we did a bit of looking forward. Excuse me. I'd like to translate that now into dollar projections, and let's just stop for a second and talk about why it's so important, dollar projections. The reason is we don't have a single metric with which to compare the field. And though dollar projections are not perfect, it does give us an idea of what happens if we add a steal, and what happens if we have a couple more home runs but a little less average. And that is what I like about them so much. So I do not subscribe to them, absolutely. I do not suggest that you do. But you got to keep an eye on him. It's a really interesting exercise. And let's apply that now, right? I'm never just going to give you ideas. I want to give you ideas and show you how we could use them in the real world towards the bottom line. Speaking of bottom line, right, look at that. How's that for a natural segue? Look at you. Go, Johnny, go. Remember, get up in the comments. Let Patty know how good of a job I'm doing and how excellent of a hire it was. Also, you could look for me on Fantasy Pros with Joe Pisapia. I got my call up to the big leagues. That podcast was awesome. We covered middle infielders. So if you're looking for busts and values and salary auction values and all that stuff, we covered it all. It was all that, and it was kind of funny. So let's get back into these dollar projections and how you see what we laid out before in like tiers, which I think is fine for people to think in terms of tiers. But now let's see if that translates into the dollar expectation. So Trey Turner, light years above the field at $31. As far as Derek's projections go, Ozzie Albies only at 19 to Simeon at 17. So I guess he's a bit lower than I am in Albies. I think I have Albies for more steals. I think I have Albies for a bit higher average, and particularly with steals. Those are the kind of things that bump up the dollar value. So that's why you don't want to just subscribe to it, but want to understand the underpinnings and the machinations of it and just how these things work. So if we're looking as far as tiers for dollar return, Trey Turner is all by himself at 31. Albies and Simeon, 19 and 17 respectively. Altuve right behind at 16. Polanco at 14. Marte and Merrifield at 13. But now think about that pairing where Marte is going compared to where Merrifield is going. Merrifield is going in like the second. Marte is going in the fourth or the fifth. So right at the bat, we're going to get into the exercise. And of course, you know how I do. I kind of charted it for us because I always think visualization really helps. So for the audio people, again, I'm doing my best to talk you through it. But if you do have a chance, try and pop over to the YouTube channel, the MMN YouTube channel, and give a look at these charts. Because again, sometimes visualization really, sometimes a picture is worth 1,000 words, not to beat the old adage into the ground. So let's go down into the next tier where India is at $8. I'm pushing up against that because I have India right next to Polanco, and Polanco was up there near Altuve and Simeon, and now you think about those costs. So be willing to do your own work, to apply your own work, and allow yourself to buck the system a bit, and then we get into those lower single-digit values. I mentioned Lowe, LeMahieu at $8, Chisholm at $8, a lot of expectations there, Cronenworth and Edman for $7 and change. Now let's get into this study. So what I did, it's very simple, and again, these things are not absolute, but it is a very helpful tool for visualization. What you see on your left is your dollar return. What you see along the x-axis is your ADP. So the further to the right we move, the later in the draft we are, the higher up we go, the better the player is expected to be. The line you see there is just a general trend line, just to give us an idea of where players may fall in regards to value. If a player falls on the downside of the line, underneath the line, below the line, these are players that maybe are overvalued. You see Whit Merrifield. You see Marcus Simeon. Now, I didn't, this graph was pre-made. It's all computerized. So our work, having kind of pegged Merrifield and Simeon for maybe being overvalued, the chart validates it, the price being too high for the expectations. Let's head back down on the line. Further down, you see a big, giant gap where no second basemen are really going. That might be part of the reason Merrifield and Simeon are going. Maybe there's a press for scarcity. I do not allow that to affect me. I always preach we want to be proactive as opposed to reactive, and having these kind of exercises done is probably the best way to do that. So once we get into the late 70s, 80s, and 90s, we start to see that fuller clump of second basemen go. So by the chart, again, if you're not looking at it, undervalued per the chart. Jazz Chisholm, the most overvalued. Brandon Lowe, slightly overvalued. Jonathan India, right on the line. And now keep that in mind that I am above the projections on India, which would put him above the line for my own work. Edman here is ringing as a value. And again, I'm willing to push him in the other direction. So as much as I love Derek and respect his work, I just don't subscribe to that. And I suggest that you do the same with me. Feel free to challenge my work, and I'll even expand on that. I welcome you in the comments to challenge any and everything that you've heard me bring to you, because again, I try and show you my work, show you how I got there, and I'm more than willing to be wrong. In fact, every day that I'm wrong is probably a day that I learned something. So I've been more focused when we get to the application again. I've been more focused on that clump around the line of valued second baseman. So I've been into Altuve, Jorge Polanco, Jonathan India, and Ketel Marte. And usually in draft rooms, I've been finding, because I have them so similarly valued, or my projections are so close, I generally take the last one. A lot of times it's been India, and I'm fine with that because I really love Jonathan India. I think the sky is the limit for him as he begins, his true career arc as just a rookie and rookie of the year. So just that is pretty much it for everybody, just to give an idea of the second base landscape and where you want to go. If you have the very early picks, you go for Trey Turner. If you don't and you want Tatis at the 1, you pass on Turner. You're likely not going to get Albies, but it doesn't mean you need to take Merrifield or Simeon. You should feel comfortable on that next wraparound going with Polanco or India, Marte if you're okay with the injuries. Personally, I am skipping over Tommy Edman because I believe the lineup spot again is in jeopardy, and he needed 691 plate appearances to get those 30 steals. So when we're really drafting a player for a certain category, I want to make sure that the opportunity, or at least my perceived opportunities, are maximized. And I don't get that with Edman. Again, I think the home run projections are a bit lofty, and if we take away some steals and take away some home runs, all of a sudden we have a player that's going to be way below that value line. So chalk the big dude up for any of that clump in the middle. Do not be upset about getting Altuve, India, Polanco, Marte, for sure. Now, what do you do if you're missing those guys? Don't worry, I can't really get into any granular detail before we get out of here, but I will drop you some names because there are a couple second basemen I like afterwards. Excuse me. And they don't even have to be MIs necessarily. I'm okay with Colton Wong. He was a sleeper that I mentioned on the Fantasy Pros podcast. I'm okay with Colton Wong as my starting second baseman. Yeah, I worry about the injuries a bit, but if you're in a fab league, waivers and ads and stuff, they know what, you ride him till the wheels fall off. We don't know if he's going to get hurt, and you replace him when he does. Whenever he does play, he's pretty effective. The batting average is more than palatable. He's going to score runs and steal bases. Another player that will certainly benefit from a DH. So don't be afraid to go after, to miss and wait on the guys that we don't like, that we don't think are valuable, and go back to either Colton Wong or even a Ryan McMahon, who maybe I'm not so hot on for third base, want more power there. I think 22 home runs and 8 steals with a 265 will be just fine. Plus, with Trevor Story missing, there's a bit of a vacuum in the lineup, and I think McMahon very well might slide up into the top third every single day. So that should do it from us here at Corked Stats and the Mayo Media Network with John Laghezza, the big dude. So appreciate you. Thanks for picking up. We're putting down. Please make sure to like the video, subscribe to the Mayonet, and get up in the comments and tell me what you like, what you don't like, what you're indifferent to, maybe players you'd like to see breaking down, maybe any questions you've had, things you'd like me to expand on or subtract from, I guess. So that should do it from the big dude. Again, remember, when you work this hard, it feels so much less like luck, don't it? All right, everyone, take care. Enjoy your day, yo. Peace.